Hi, my name is Saad, and today I will be presenting on hormone regulation in the Olympics and why, for the sake of equality, we need to ban it. So first, let's go over some key terms. First, sex is the biological makeup of a person's body. On the flip side, we have gender, which is how somebody identifies. Now, a cisgendered individual is what the social norm expects people to be. It's when somebody is male and a man, or female and a woman. There are also cases of intersex individuals. This is when an individual is not entirely male or entirely female. Commonly, this involves a female with functioning gonads, and therefore they might have heightened levels of testosterone. But the biggest issue that we're going to see with this is they just don't fit into this cisgendered norm that we have. Okay, so we also have the gender binary. So the gender binary is the social understanding that males and females are men and women, respectively. The gender binary does not acknowledge other gender identities, and it also outlines specific social roles for men and women. You've probably heard of these or experienced them yourself. Men are more expected to be found in the workforce and have a career. Women are more expected to stay home and clean. So the gender binary is inherently sexist toward women. We'll get more into that later, but keeping in mind that femininity is defined as emotional, passive, weak, inconsistent, whereas masculinity is rational, active, courageous, strong, and brave. And of course, femininity is associated with women and masculinity is associated with men. A couple more key terms. So I'll be talking about the International Association of Athletic Federations. This is known as the IAAF. There's also the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. The IAAF is the international governing body for athletics, and the IOC is the governing body that oversees all aspects of Olympic competition. So they're kind of the big names in deciding how athletics run. So another key term that you'll need to keep in mind is androgens. So androgens are male sex hormones like testosterone is probably a common one that you've heard of. So every sex has androgens, but there typically are higher levels found in males. And androgens create what we typically see as things that we think of with masculinity. So like a hairy chest, big muscles, height, stuff like that. Okay, so on to kind of the main topics of what I'll be talking about today. So sex testing. Sex testing is the biological verification of an athlete. Sex testing assumes that the cisgendered norm, so that women will be female and men will be male. And so within the Olympics, sex testing has occurred for decades in order to make sure that women are competing with women and men are competing with men, because those are seen as fair and equal groups. So this is the IOC trying to provide an equal playing field for their athletes. So sex testing has evolved into hormone regulation. And hormone regulation is the medical alteration of women athletes' hormone levels, their androgen levels, so those male sex hormones, in order to match the approved level of what women's androgens should be. So that's what hormone regulation is. We'll get more into that. So now that we kind of have a basic understanding and some key terms in mind, let's talk about, I mentioned that shift from sex testing to hormone regulation. So sex testing was, it really obviously reinforced that gender binary and that cisgendered norm it started even with just visual checks of making sure that women athletes were female and men athletes were male. This is mostly sex testing and hormone regulation targets women because there's a fear that men are going to somehow pretend to be women and they'll have an advantage in women's sports because testosterone is understood to be a crucial hormone in athletic ability, and so men are expected to excel and women are expected to not be quite as good because women aren't supposed to have as high levels of testosterone. So When transgender athletes got the right to compete, this was kind of around the same time of that shift to hormone regulation. So the idea was that now the IOC and the IAAF don't have to police their athletes' sex, and they're not going to tell them whether they're male or female. Rather, they're going to police their androgen levels, so those hormone levels, to make sure they're within the appropriate levels of men and women. So essentially now the IOC and the IAAF are defining femininity and masculinity for us, which is, I'm going to show, sexist. So women athletes are expected to have androgen levels that are below men athletes. And anything above what's considered normal for women athletes, so if their androgen levels are too high, which we would call hyperandrogenism, that would be seen as an advantage over their other peers and competitors. So there's a couple ways that women can get these advantages. Being intersex can mean that women have functioning gonads and might produce more testosterone naturally, which is seen as an unfair advantage by the IOC and the IAAF. There's a lot of syndromes. I'll go over one more for the sake of time. There is the androgen insufficiency syndrome. So this is when a child is born with an X and a Y chromosome. So remember, females are typically born with XX and males with XY. So when a child is born with an XY chromosome, but their body cells are insensitive to testosterone, the development goes into the direction of being female. So again, this is called androgen insufficiency syndrome, and it means that this athlete is not receptive to testosterone. So testosterone does not have an effect on their body. And again, the IOC and the IAAF have deemed testosterone a crucial hormone in athletic ability. And there's a heightened number based on percentages of people with androgen insufficiency syndrome that are represented in the Olympic athlete and competitive athlete population. So that means that there's a higher percentage of people that aren't receptive to testosterone at all in a field where testosterone is seen as being important in making them good at what they do, which is sports. So that is the shift from sex testing to hormone regulation. We talked about how testosterone is not a sufficient predictor of athletic ability. And essentially, as Jamie Schultz puts it in her piece, Standard Same Refrain, the IAAF's Regulations on Hyperandrogenism, she writes, an overabundance of naturally produced testosterone in a male competitor would be considered a genetic gift, an athletic endowment to celebrate, while the same condition in a female would derail her career. Alright, so we also need to understand why sports are masculine. So first of all, in our society, women are defined as being body object. So you can think about how you've probably heard the term objectification. So women are objectified and their bodies are understood to be object. Men, on the other hand, are understood as body subject. So sports require the body subject because you have to have autonomous decision and the ability to excel with your body for the purpose of something out of yourself. So sport, as Iris Marion Young puts it, by its nature, exhibits the essential body subject. Masculinist culture defines women, on the other hand, as the essential body object. Thus, in a culture which defines women as other, sport and women are mutually exclusive concepts. So already, based on understanding sport as masculine, women are facing exclusion because they're not expected to be excelling in a masculine realm. So hormone regulation really works to maintain the gender binary, and here's why. So now that we understand sports is masculine, and we understand that testosterone is overvalued and not as important as the IOC and IAAF think it is, we can understand how hormone regulation maintains this inherently sexist gender binary. So masculinity is associated with sports and with men, and so men are expected to excel in sports. Women are not supposed to engage in masculinity, so when they excel at sports, they're defying their femininity. Hormone regulation attacks women's femininity on the basis that they shouldn't be good at performing masculine activities, and the only reason that they would be able to excel is if their masculine and male androgen levels are too high. So essentially, by instituting hormone regulation and targeting women, the IOC is saying that only men who are male should be able to excel at sports, which it doesn't make sense. So in order to reach equality on the playing field for all athletes, the IOC and the IAAF need to ban hormone regulation entirely in order to stop oppressing women's opportunities and women's ability to play in sport. Because by suppressing their hormone levels medically, what the IOC is showing women is that they are undervalued and they're not expected to excel. But women are very good at sports and they have every right to perform at their natural level. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Have a nice day.